Hello. I took a colored people moment to get online because one of my big philosophies around resting uh, means not rushing myself. And I would rather show up somewhere late and rested than be on time and frazzled. So thank you to folks who are going to join the live in real time. And also shout out to anyone who catches this on the rewatch. I'm so excited to see what's going to happen because I don't know, right? I just knew that it was really important for me to open up intentional space and taking it back to my roots, very much on some Sankofa shit, creating digital space during the 2020s. You know, outside is cool, but I made magic from my living room, you know, and I'm feeling very connected to when I went live in February 2021 for Black Dream Experiment before it was called Black Dream Experiment. And I just put a simple flyer that says, all my niggas got dreams, press conference with no press. And I went live and I talked about what dream work had looked like for me at that point in time. And it ended up, I had a few folks come on the live and share some of their dreams and talk about their journey. And so this will be an homage to that, but also different, right? And so something that I want to do to ground myself before I do anything else is to acknowledge that we exist in a lineage, right? Acknowledge our ancestors and also acknowledge our descendants. And remember, we're not doing this shit alone. I've been reflecting deeply. I'll do a recap of like some of what my day has been like because I know I had said I was going to share prompts, but like my life today has been the prompts and I will reflect and give people space to engage with that. But one of the first things I did this morning when I got up is put on an album called I don't know, the case fell, but it had Soul of a Nation and Afrocentric Visions in the Age of Black Power. And it's this compilation, and the first track on it is Gil Scott-Heron's The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. And I let myself just like move to it. I did some yoga stretching, but also just like started feeling called to like dance and move my hips. And then I remembered like we come from people who dance in hell, literally, right? I have ancestors who participated in ring shouts, right? We have folks who went in the middle of the horrors that was slavery, sneaking off into, yes, Gil Scott-Heron is that guy, sneaking off into the middle of the woods to have church, right? To have hush harbors, right? We have access within us, the ability to regulate and transmute. I remember one of my internet homies, Jazz, first posted about like twerking being a means of regulating your nervous system and your root chakra, right? And when you start to feel insecure and unstable, like moving your hips can be something. And then you think about across the diaspora, people of the global majority, you can point to there's some type of ritual practice that involves movement. And that has been thinking about myself in an ancestral lineage when it comes to dancing and singing and knowing that that is not work avoidance. That's not escapism. That is doing what we're supposed to do in these times, right? When we give ourselves room to play, right, that's when we can receive messages. When we give ourselves room to rest, we'll get into Harriet later because there's a whole piece I want to share with that. But before I get going, I'm going to do this practice called Ancestors Watching, which I first encountered from BYP 100. They had a Black Joy mixtape. And they have this track, and then I've incorporated into so many different community spaces that I'm in. It is normally done in real time. where myself and or another facilitator sings the refrain, which is just ancestors watching. I know they're watching, ancestors watching, right? But while doing that, the invitation is to invoke literally our ancestors, and always thinking about ancestors, not just in our direct lineage, like genetically, but communal ancestors, right? You will always catch me speaking about Harriet or Toni Morrison or Fannie Lou Hamer or Ntozake Shange or Audre Lorde, right? Because I view those as being, one, my work and existence being in direct conversation with them, but also they left something for me. And so I want to invite folks, if they feel like chatting, typing in the comments, but also just in your heart, saying it out loud in your room, as I sing this, to think of the people who have loved on you from beyond. And also, another prompt is to think of, as the future ancestors, dreaming wild dreams for our descendants. What does it look like for us, the work that we are doing now, to be a gift to them, right? What does it look like now? What are we watching over, right? If we're visioning the future that is so bright and magnificent and not even untouched, right? But unburdened by the failures of white failurism, of capitalism, of xenophobia and trans antagonism. If that is the world that we're conjuring up, what does it bring up in us when we're watching our descendants live in that? What does it bring up in us as we are thinking of the future selves that we are here now, right? So I'm going to sing this a few times. I don't know. And take breaks as I sing and say some of my folks' names. And I encourage you to think, speak, type, move as well. Oops. There's my water bottle. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Lois Marie Spikes, Frances Dixie Olivia Smith Daniels, Jerry Spikes. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Auntie Pat, Miss Janet, Miss Pam. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Harriet Tubman, Audre Lorde, Toni Morrison, Ntozake Shange, Lucille Clifton. One last time. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Okay. Got that housekeeping in order. I wanted to be intentional in creating this space as a space of flow. When I speak to dream experiments, right, be it you talking about Black Dream Experiment, when I did Dream Forget Return, I called it a live dream experiment. It really just means creating a space for whimsy and curiosity and inquiry and play and rest and being present while we're in it, right? We talk about mindfulness, and mindfulness is just doing things mindfully, right? Like being present. And I think in general, a lot of times we feel like, or I'll say I statements, sometimes I can engage with some of these wellness things as if they're chores, right? As if they are so like these things that I have to do versus like the the things that I'm already doing just intentionally. And so when I create space to daydream and play, like that is wellness. Like that is me taking care of myself. That is me creating spaciousness for what I need to do. You know, so I wanted to create space if at any point people feel connected to what I'm saying, to comment in the chat. I wanted to share a few different pieces that have been keeping me company as I've navigated this time, right? I speak a lot to Audre Lorde, and specifically her quote. I put it in my stories, but I want to say it right. It's a face. So the quote that I root myself in when it comes to today and beyond is, to face the realities of our lives is not a reason for despair. Despair is a tool of your enemies. Facing the reality of our lives gives us motivation for action, for you are not powerless. You know why the hard questions must be asked. It is not altruism. It is self-preservation, survival. And so as we are, I also am being really intentional with my language today, especially in this space, and not claiming the worst case scenario, even in like how I speak, right? Not claiming the negative interpretation as being inevitable or the only thing, right? So my first inclination would be like, as we navigate this hellscape, but I want to infuse the space as we navigate this liminal space of possibility. There are a lot of feelings that are understandably coming up. And my work with dreaming is never about work avoidance and toxic positivity and not acknowledging the material conditions of our lives. In fact, the material conditions of my life informs the way in which I am dreaming beyond it. The knowing that I am from a legacy of humans who looked at the shit in front of them and said, this is ghetto, we can do better, right? When I speak to Harriet Tubman, right, I speak to the fact that she was not out here just being a daft and do-it-I-do who didn't know that slavery existed, right? This wasn't somebody who just lived this charmed life and was just theorizing in an ivory tower, right? This is someone who had gone through the things and took what she learned, not just because of it, but in spite of it, in possibility beyond it, right? My favorite quote or story about Harriet Tubman is in 1861, she was at the house of an accomplice and was upstairs and came running down the stairs and said, my people are free, my people are free, I can see it. And the story goes that she was so ecstatic that she couldn't eat or sleep. She was just like in that moment, and she knew it to be true. And then 2 years later, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and then white people did, she wasn't fazed, right? Because she called it in. And not only called it in, right, but saw it as inevitable, right? And I think when I talk about dreaming, language that comes up a lot is like the how and when is none of my business. We can get so caught up on the strategy of what does it have to look like, versus we want to be so enmeshed in the strategy that we do not give space for even the what and the why to be something that we focus on, right? Abolition was a buzzword that was thrown around a lot in 2020. Defund, right? Defund was the more readily accessible language that was used, but then there were also people who were talking about abolition. And my experience of that was that we were speaking to it very vaguely. And we were speaking to it still through the lens of what reality says the next step has to be, right? What is a realistic way to enact these things? And very little conversation was dedicated to, well, what do we actually want? Not what do we not want? Not what do we want like a little bit, right? But the best case scenario, big picture, if we are imagining a world in which the prison industrial complex has no power over our communities, if we are imagining a world in which the nonprofit industrial complex does not commodify care, we are imagining a world where people are housed and fed and taken care of and healthy, what does that actually look like? Have you spent time mapping out for yourself on a micro level, what that actually would feel like, right? What would it feel like to wake up and know that not just you are okay, but your people are good, right? And why do we have such trouble? Why is it so hard to even create space in our own imagination for that? Right? Why is it so difficult for us to imagine a world in which it is not haves and have-nots? And I take it to another one of my literary mothers, Toni Morrison. And if you know me, you know my favorite story about her is when she was being interviewed by that white man. And he asked, why don't you write about white people in your books? And she says, you are asking the wrong question. White people, and she's speaking to whiteness and like the consenting to whiteness, right, have a very serious problem. If you are only tall when someone else is on their knees, are you any good? And I could preach a whole sermon off of that quote, right? Because the reality is we are indoctrinated and conditioned to think, no, we are not good. And so we have to manufacture goodness. And if I don't actually think I'm good, you sure as hell aren't good. And so I have to create an other. I have to create an at least. And this is how we see violence perpetuated in communities that have also been marginalized, right? This is how you see transphobia in Blackness. This is how you see classism. You know, this is how you see all these other things because you want to be the at least. Right? I might be Black, but at least I'm not poor. I might be this, but at least I'm not fat. I might be, you know, right? And if that, and that I'm really intentional about extending grace and context because it's not our fault, right? We are told over and over again that this is just the way of the world. At least I don't have to wear a mask. Okay? Yeah. Like there's this, I may be disabled, but at least I don't have to wear a mask. Yeah. Or like I may be disabled, but I'm not clocked as such, right? I think there is this disconnect from the possibility that we are all worthy, right? And we are all moving with this like embodied fear that like maybe I'm going to say all, I'm going to say this has been my experience, in my perception of the ways in which we move, right? I think that society conditions us into this idea that you cannot have it all. Like having it all is illogical, right? And also what we consider to be all, right? When we think of success, we think of success through the lens of accrual and capitalism and abundance that way, which is very intentional, right? Because the system of whiteness and beyond that, the system of othering and hierarchy and like not believing that we're intrinsically whole says that all that we can see is all that there is, right? So you must be doing well if I can see these things, as opposed to the intrinsic things that can't be clocked, right? I have moved away from saying that I am a marginalized person, right? I moved away from any language that implies that my people were not abundant, right? I think about the fact that like I am spiritually resourced in a way that some folks whose bank accounts are bananas don't even conceptualize, right? And why I speak to the idea of like people of the global majority who have ancestors beyond theory, and use seasoning, right? Versus BIPOC, because there is across the globe folks who understand that what you see isn't all that's there, and not even on the big esoteric thing, right? But on this idea that I come from people who made magic out of the absence of what we think we're supposed to have, right? And that is abundance, right? That isn't lack, that isn't scarcity. And so when we give ourselves permission to say, hey cousin, to say that even in the midst of the what the fuck, right, there is abundance here for me. That's abundance available for me. That switches something. And taking it back to the whole dreamy imagination space, our imagination, our dream space is one of the very things that can never be colonized. I come from people who sang songs like, I'm going to give my church a moment. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And and I had to slide it in there at some point, right? But so the idea, taking back to when I was breaking down spirituals in 2021, right? The idea before I be a slave, if you're just looking at this as a piece of literature, like, oh, they're talking about resisting like the idea of like dying rather than being enslaved, right? Which some people did, right? But that was not the only way of resistance. But before I be slaved here, right? Before I be slaved in my spirit, I'm be dead, right? And I take that as an invitation to the idea that they can never, take it automatically. It chills my body, but not my soul, right? I'm not going to sing Wade in the Water. There is so much rich information in Negro spirituals, just as a tangent, that gives us an understanding that our ancestors knew what the fuck was up. And if it wasn't our ancestors, it's available to us in the here and now for free. You don't got to pay no sign-up costs or nothing. No paperwork. And so yeah, I think I want to open up. Like I said, if any point people feel connected to what I'm saying, I think I want to open up the dream prayer line. If anyone wants to be a guest and come up, the only container or boundary that I'm putting around like having this conversation is I want to encourage us. Ooh, there's a leak in this old building, and my soul has got to move. My soul has got to move. My soul. That is my shit. LaShawn did not have to go so fucking hard. Oh, there's a leak in this whole building. Shout out to, for folks who are watching this on the rewatch, Thea posted that in the comments, and it stirred something up in me. But yeah, the ancestors been on. They've been known game. And I'm very clear that the same wonder-working power available to Harriet is available to us now. And hopelessness and despair and apathy, like I said, it makes sense. I will never be out here being like, you are dumb, failing, all these things, because you are having very human reactions to horrific things that we should not be comfortable with. I just know that there are pathways of resistance and victory that we are not accessing collectively, that we need to go back and get and incorporate and integrate into the movement work, right? Because I was thinking about people romanticize certain aspects of liberation movements without acknowledging that there were other things that were going on. There is no revolution without community care. I'm going to say that one more time. Amen. There is no revolution without community care. You don't get the Montgomery bus boycotts without an infrastructure and an ecosystem of care to make sure that people have carpools to get to work, make sure that people are being fed, that children are being watched. There is no Montgomery bus boycott if you just throw up a flyer. You were going into pool halls. You were going to churches. You were talking to people on the street. There were phone trees. There is no Harriet motherfucking Tubman without an underground railroad of people who are willing to go there to house people in their homes, right? To go toe to toe with the opps, right? We don't have a culture of that right now, but we're asking so much. And I'm not saying that what we are doing is stupid. I'm saying that there needs to be care infused into what we are doing. And there needs to be imagination infused. So there are so many different ways for the victory to come. And if we are holding tight to it only looking like one thing, we are missing out on the possibility of so many other things that are already showing itself to you. But are you clocking it? Are you clocking it? So that was a whole lot. I want to, and I'm going to make a comment, right? If you want to come up, I invite you to speak to your dreams, to your visions and imagination. For the container of this Instagram live, the rest of the world is paused. We don't have to consent to that raggedy asshole right now, right? We don't have to say, oh, I want to do this, but I need to get this, right? We're going to assume that the how has been taken care of. For example, I have had a dream for, I was going to say a decade, but I've had this vision in different chunks like my whole life. But it's clear of like, I want a ranch for dreaming and healing. I see in this space. So that's part of the prompt, right? What do you see? What does it feel like? What's the tea? What's the vibe? I see this being a space for replenishment. I see people being able to frolic. Like my first vision of this was like the field that Celia and Nettie ran through, right? I see people being able to lay out by water. I see people being able to work with the land in their hands. I see people being able to create recklessly in whatever medium that calls to them. I see laughter. I see home cooked meals. I see dinners. I see performances. I see people doing yoga. I see the babies being integrated into the community. I see a space of refuge for people if they need extended stay to be somewhere, right? As an alternative to having to go to inpatient psychiatric facilities. If you are really just craving rest and need that space that's available for you. I see culturally responsive programming, or not even culturally responsive, but culturally affirming and luscious programming that centers Black culture, that centers Indigenous folks, that centers the variety, the multiplicity of AAPI cultures and brown folks, and like just this opportunity for activation of the dream space with no limitations when it comes to resources. And this being a capacity building thing, this being a life affirming institution that overflow impacts so many different areas. Right? And so if you acknowledge what I did, right, I painted this big picture It's very intentional and not saying, and I'm gonna need $100,000, and if people want to come and whatever, like all these little things that we put on the dreams, that ultimately are just us hedging our bets, right? I could say if part of this dream is that I have to go out and raise the capital and find all these grants, right? That's one way that the how could happen. But it also could be that I meet a person who has come to one of my shows and happens to know somebody who has been wanting to invest in this community thing, and all of a sudden $100,000 check is written. Two very possible scenarios, both of them none of my fucking business. All I know is the dream ranch is here. Not coming, it's here. It's in another timeline that I'm not right now, but it exists because I see it so vividly. And the shape might look different, right? It might be like me thinking it's just one little plot of land. Maybe it's several ranches across the country. That's not my business. All I know is the what is very clear and the why is very clear. And so I want to invite, if anybody feels called to come up and share their dreams for themselves or for the collective, because collective and self go together, right? Self-care, collective care, the dreams for ourselves, the dreams for community. When you are showing up in your power and your magic, that is also activating so many things that you don't even clock. So the dream line is now open. I'm going to make a little comment that can be pinned. If anybody would like to request to come up, I can also call you up if you are in the room and you don't know how to request. Yourself in the collective. We can also just vibe. I have music that I think that no one from a record label will try to find me for. I have set aside. Okay, cool. Comment pinned. So now if anybody wants to come up. What other things can I share? I set aside this hour and I'm going to be obedient that that's how long I'm going to be on. What else can I share today? Oh, last night I stayed up and was working on some mixed media pieces. And the way that my visual art practice is very intuitive and very, I don't know what the fuck it is until it's here. And so, and it's also very much like I do something, set it, come back to it, and I have no idea what step it was. So I had started coloring this when I was at Choice Lake day before yesterday. And then last night, this morning, I was moving through a bunch of cut up words that I'd either cut up before or like I just randomly went through magazines and cut out words that sounded interesting and then made a found poem. So the piece, it says, "Be here. Spirit sees the future beyond fire. You belong everywhere. Savor your story. Immerse yourself in free. Unlock a whole new world." So I don't think it's going to be all flipped and shit, but this is what it looks like. The picture. I'll post it on my stories. But I really liked that. Be here. Spirit sees the future beyond fire. You belong everywhere. Savor your story. Immerse yourself in free. Unlock a whole new world. So the other thing that I will share while I am here and have some downtime is I went through my chapbook recently, day before yesterday or something like that. And the thing about my chapbook, I came up with it, or I printed it for the first time in April of 2022, but it was a compilation of me just going through my notes app and Google Docs and journals and tweets and just pulling things together that I had put out in 2019 through to 2022. And one of the free writes that I just had in my notes app that I really think is fly, that I didn't anticipate, was I wrote, hold on, make sure, I feel like there's a different version. So it's beyond white supremacy. I imagine a world of anyhow, somewhere between I'll fly away and picky bitch checklists. I imagine a home that holds all. My future cannot exist in silos. That is so white. To segregate time like it don't all got a right to be here. Yesterday and tomorrow are cousins who sing freely on summer days with the windows down. My time don't know a world without borrowing. Been a mutual aid. My grandmas and future daughters are both on the other side telling stories saying, look at that woman with so much laugh and hurt she can hardly stand it. I check both ways. I don't know if I will see a world that does not remember white failurism. Time is not meant to divorce itself. We are not sent here to be oblivious to the yes and that has always grounded us. I hope that when we do fly away, we still hold the yesterdays close. Do not throw the survival out with the circumstance or the anyhow out with the bullshit. We carry this with us because it makes the present more gift. We get to save our shouts for leisure because, of course, Black Lives Matter here. And our comfort is not so much revolutionary as it is a staple on the menu. And Black excellence is not a bouncer holding anyone back from getting into the club because Black being is the admission. So, I am trying to think what I'm gonna do. I want to read this piece by Alandria Williams, so not an original poem, but it is something that I forever return to. It is just such a gorgeous piece that grounds me in what this work is and why I recommit myself to showing up. And honor like the spaces in which I feel fatigued and the spaces in which I feel so far away from this message, and the gratitude that I always return, right? And the gratitude that even when I don't feel worthy, even when I don't feel grounded, that doesn't cancel me out, that doesn't make me wrong, right? Even when I feel like there's no hope to be had, I'm still me, right? Because as someone who talks about dreaming so much, one of the things in my brain tries to do this really cruel is being like, bitch, you're a fraud. Because I be feeling down sometimes. But I be feeling down sometimes because shit is rough, right? But that opportunity to come back, the opportunity to reground, to plant our feet, like, is important. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means that you're growing. So, We Are Worthy by Alandria Williams. We are worthy, not because of what we produce, but because of who we are. We are divine bodies of light and darkness. You are not worthy because of what you offer, not because of what is in your mind, not for the support you give others, not for what you give at all. We are worthy and whole just because. In this great turning, in this great pandemic, in this radical readjustment and alignment, we are not disposable. We are needed. We are the very people that have withstood everything that has been thrown at us as a people. And as Maya Angelou would say, still I rise. We arise from the pain. We rise from the grief. We arise from the limits people place on us and the limits we place on ourselves. We rise to be the children and the ancestors. We rise to be our true selves in relationship to our families and communities, recognizing our liberating and whole selves, honoring them and others as we strive for abundant communities, abundant lives, abundant relationships, and abundant values and cultural manifestations. We are worthiness personified. I, you, and we are worthy and deserve a life where we are not always fighting for our existence. Imagine what we could create if we were not always in the struggle. Imagine what we could envision if we could just be let to just go there. So tired of always having to resist, to fight, demanding, pushing. To everyone that has the courage, the power, the ability to create what we want and need while rooting in what we cannot lose and who we are, you are the visionary. You are the hope. You are our ancestors' dreams. No, you might not ever end up on some list somewhere, but you are on a list in someone's heart and mind. And if it's in how you move in the world so people can see by example, you are the embodiment of what we need. Thanks to all that are the embodiment. The embodiment not of productivity, but the embodiment of radical love, care, and sanctuary. It is time. Embodiment time. Embodiment. Living one's values out loud. Let me every day live my values out loud. Let us every day live our values out loud, embodying our values. Not the productivity quotient, beyond productivity, past productivity, true embodiment. Life. Now, Miss Mama was snapping. And where I was when this piece met me was in 2020. Remember, I was in a dentist's office waiting room watching Jazz on Instagram Live read this piece because Alandria had recently passed. And it moved me so deeply, and I've returned to this piece over and over again, and where it's landing in my body right now. Like I said, especially in this time, but not just in this time, because there are times like this that have happened and that will continue to happen. Actually, I don't want to claim that. What we are experiencing now is an aspect of what has always been. And that is the things that we perceive to be good and the things that we perceive to be bad. And the opportunity that we are experiencing now is to really reflect on what these words mean in our lives, not just as flowery language, not just as theory that we pull out to sound enlightened, adding myself to, but like as a real embodied practice. What does it mean to lean into the idea that to everyone who has the courage, the power, the ability to co-create what we want and need while rooting in what we can't lose and who we are? What does that mean? What does it mean to say, imagine what we would create if we were not always in the struggle? Imagine what we could envision if we could just be let to go there. So tired of always having to resist, to fight, demanding, and pushing. I really feel like that's the thesis of what I'm consistently exploring. That's the piece that I always want to get into when I'm having these conversations with folks. Like, that's the point that I always want to get to, right? Is we can acknowledge my framework that I have for investigation or engaging, right? Is the what it is. Let's flesh out, let's name what's happening. The what it ain't. The things that we have seen happen that we don't want. The things that we know we don't want. The end game, worst case scenario that is not what we're calling for. And then taking the majority of our time, space, and energy to get into the what could be. What it is, what it ain't, what it could be. And I think of Elandria as being such an important thought leader. Part of my lineage, right? I think I come from a background in sociology, And when you are starting a social research project, you have to do a literature review, in which you take your research question and you think of what are the other bodies of work that are also exploring some aspect of this. And your work is then synthesizing what's happening and then inserting yourself in the conversation of this is where I'm showing up, right? I'm putting what Trisha Hersey is doing in conversation with what I've seen when it comes to the Black Panther Party, in conversation with my grandparents and their care practices, in conversation with my own internal landscape of where I've been processing trauma and alchemizing and transmuting these things that could have ended me and realizing that they didn't and taking lessons from that, right? And all of these things are blending together and showing up in how I conceptualize dream work and share it with the world. And so I'm so grateful for people like Alandria Williams. I think I want to cap it off with me reading my piece. I was going to say, can I? But like, this, I give myself permission. But reading a piece that I don't think I've shared on the internet in full. But it's very special to me. Like I said, especially, Gil Scott-Heron, The Revolution Will Be Televised. Will not be televised. I feel like I heard that for the first time I was in high school. Because also, I've always been this bitch in different iterations, but I've always been so fascinated by freedom fighters who took imaginative ways to address things, right? And so in high school, being really big in exploring the Black Panther Party, the Black Arts Movement, and that type of thing. So this Revolution Will Not Be Televised definitely influences this, but this piece is in conversation with so many different pieces of work around like revolutionary action that is not necessarily traditionally engaging with the system as the primary way of movement. And so before I do that, I would like to pull a card from the Rest Ministry. The Not Ministry, the Rest deck, to set the intention as we close out of this hour. Okay, so I pulled 2 cards. That was what was calling me. And so the way that the Rest deck works is on the front is an affirmation, and on the back is a practice. Or a deeper conversation into it. So the first card I pulled is divest from capitalism, lay down somewhere. And on the back, Trisha writes, when you feel guilt and shame for resting, view it as evidence of your brainwashing via grind culture. Be grateful for this insight and use it to transform the guilt into power. Rest guilt-free, knowing you are following a path to liberation. Rest is your right in an ancient practice. Rest, deprogram, repeat. And then the second one, the boom, boom, boom. I will wander and flow more. Rest is an experiment. You don't have to know everything right now. You will never know everything. Resting in a capitalist system will be meticulous love practice. You don't have to have it all figured out. Your desire to reclaim your time and your body from exhaustion is the first step to a rested future. Focus on experimenting with rest as a tool for your liberation. And insert into that conversation, dreaming. And I conceptualize dreaming. How did I write it in my, dreaming is rest, joy, play, liminal space, a live love letter where possible proves itself, right? Dreaming is entering into this interior world in which you can be curious and experimental with no consequence. And with no consequence, actually not the right language, in a way that is not tethered to what we have been conditioned into understanding. Let me run that back. Okay, so dreaming offers us spaciousness to explore, to be curious, to tinker, to recharge and replenish in a way that the external factors cannot take from us, cannot squash, right? I cannot come up to you and put a gun to your head and say, stop imagining. I can facilitate physical harm on this plane. Also, what I understand is what we see is not all that's there. When people are enacting harm and violence, they're not getting off scot-free, right? That experience that the person enacting the harm has to navigate through in the aftermath, we may not see the consequences of it, but best believe it's happening, right? There is a poster, or I have a message a day thing by my bed, and it speaks to the idea that, like, when we see these things that are evil, right, it represents a disconnect from source. Because if you're truly tapped into love, right, I always say, if I was a supreme being, I'd be eating mangoes with my titties out, not being out here trying to rape and pillage the whole world, right? So if you were truly tapped into source, to wholeness, taking it back to Toni Morrison, to the understand that you are good, to the dream space, you would not be enacting that violence, right? People who are doing that are in serious pain and disconnect, and their return is not our... Just because we not see the impact and the fallout from the folks who are enacting harm doesn't mean that it's not there, right? And so if we can also acknowledge that just because we see externally that people are doing stuff to us, that does not change who we are, right? You may think that I am not worthy because you have your own complex around worthiness. That does not shift who I am. That does not shift who you are, my brother in Christ, right? Like the fellow person I share this earth with, right? And I think that's something that's really important to ground us in when we talk about both of these cards. Speak to the individual level, but it's also very much on the collective, right? When you feel guilt and shame for dreaming, right? Viewed as evidence of brainwashing, right? That's, I think, the big thing that I want to leave us with. So I'm going to read my piece around the revolution, and I'm going to get on out your way on today. Thank you for rocking with me, people who are watching this live, and shout out to the people who are going to catch this on the replay. I am very grateful that I decided to be obedient to this thing that was tapping on my shoulder saying to do this, because Lord knows that I was going back and forth about doing this and debating if it was worth it, if it would be necessary. And once again, how and when is not my business, and there is something that knows better than me. So this piece about revolution, I don't know if I've titled it, but we'll just say revolution. Drink some of my blue Kool-Aid, because we're Sankofa today. We're going back and getting the things that are joyous memories. So when I'm doing this live, I sing a mantra and refrain beforehand. And I normally lovingly bully / invite people to becoming a mass choir. And so, but I'm just going to sing the refrain and then get into it. Dreaming is a revolution. Imagination's our solution. Dreaming is a revolution. Imagination's our solution. In 2020, as the world ended and began again, I questioned everything. Rolled in why and what now, through apathy and despair, and I ended up Sankofa boomeranging to the basics. Possibility has always existed beyond what we have been handed as inevitable. Remembered, rage is a sacred indicator that invites us into action. The watershed is necessary. And the soil nurtured in its aftermath survives to tell the story. So revolution asks, what bloom are you willing to cultivate for the archives? Revolution is mutual aid. looks like car washes and rallies, public comments and poetry readings, and my grandparents never cooking in small quantities, so there was always enough to send a plate over to so-and-so's house. Revolution is intuitive, on some Harriet shit, leaning into all the things that productivity think foolish, like naps and talking to God and trusting nature, running downstairs proclaiming your people free with vigor before spirit makes tangible good on its promise. The revolution will not be contained to an Instagram live, cannot be measured in likes and shares and comments and awards. The revolution knows the significance of need to know, of sacred relationship, village beyond theory. Revolution will also take place in moments of radio silence, moving like lasagna, building railroads, not for opposition's perception. The revolution clocks trauma response when it sees it, remembers we are conditioned into abuse as normative and inescapable. Revolution knows shame is a tool of the oppressor, and untangling with grace is the key to unlocking all the prison doors. The revolution lives beyond election season, stretches past defund and DEI, is an abolitionist. Revolution says Ruth Wilson Gilmore had it right. It's not about absence, all about presence and what life-affirming institutions we desire. Revolution sees beyond the kingdom fall and fleshes out the future before it makes its way earthside. The revolution say cops don't just wear badges. Sometimes they carry county clipboards, run grocery stores and school boards, operate beautiful Black-owned businesses. So revolution say we most revoke consent from white failurism and all its raggedy ass unlegendary children like anti-Blackness and queer antagonism, xenophobia, all ugly and unimaginative. The revolution sounds a lot like Toni Morrison. Ask, if you are only tall when someone else is on their knees, are you any good? As unrhetorical and tender question, reflecting on the ways invites us to examine the ways we have accepted poison as good enough remedy, reflecting on the ways in which we have been conditioned to think worthy an exclusive club with bouncer rather than a block party with a dope-ass DJ and unlimited bomb auntie mac and cheese. The revolution says it could be as simple as breeze and butterflies spreading like wildflowers. The revolution says the best case scenario could be ours. The dream is the point. The hunch is the data. The you know what will be dope is the portal. Revolution says there is no sign-up cost, no ribbon to cut, or paperwork to be filled out. We can start now in the mirror, in the journal, in our conversations. Revolution thrives in micro to macro expansion, not the other way around. Revolution thrives in micro to macro expansion, not the other way around. The revolution asks, are you willing to give love? Are you ready to receive love? Are you committed to being love? Revolution says a shot of Shakur summed me up so perfectly, with balm and battle cry and call and response. If you was in person, I would ask you to repeat after me, but I'm going to do it myself. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Amen, Ashe, and so the fuck it is. I'm so grateful to every soul who witnessed this in the live. I know that there are so many things happening, so I sit in appreciation for anyone who sat and listened with me. And I also extend so much gratitude to anyone who catches us on the replay. I'm having a really emotional moment, mainly because I'm so grateful I allowed myself to go there. And that is the dream experiment, right? When you have this hunch and this tap on your shoulder, like, I don't know why something's telling me to do this. Something's telling me to go to this thing, to talk to this person, right? That is part of the thing. We get messages all the fucking time. And a lot of times we think of dreaming just when we're sleeping, because that's the only time that we be sitting still enough for spirit to speak to us. But we dream out loud all the time if you just trust the tap, right? And you know the tap that is guilt and shame, right? And the tap that's like curiosity and possibility and getting in a relationship and learning, because sometimes it all be blended together, right? But I know when I am being called to do something because something is telling me in my gut to do it, and I know when it's ego. And I know that when it's ego, it don't ever pop off the way that it is when I'm grounded and rooted. So me doing this was me being obedient to the nudge, because I know that that's part of my work. And we all have a role in this work, in revolution, whatever is in your heart. And here's the key. Here's the point. The dream isn't far removed from who you are, right? Your dream is in alignment with the gifts and talents and skills that are embedded in you. So the shit that feels like air, the shit that feels like ocean breeze that you love to do is a clue, right? And we all have work to do. We all have roles to play. And I promise that we can dream into the kingdom. Like, we can dream and chant these kingdoms down while having a good ass time and being in our power. Because as someone, my Black Dream Experiment journey was rooted in me being an organizer who was exhausted and was circling the drain. And I sat and I said, there has to be something better than this. Yes, I am here for the movement, but my niggas got dreams, and that matters too. And I just want to leave on that note, that whatever is in your heart, if it keeps coming to you over and over and over again, you are not the child of a evil creator. That is, you are not given all of these things on your heart to torture you. And I know that that is the work of this world, to divorce us from our dream space and make us feel stupid forever, wishing and hoping. This world will tell you that you don't get to even take time for yourself, right? This world will tell you that it does not matter that you love this thing because rents do, right? Because your parents didn't have this, because of all these things. And more than, I don't need people to remember my name, I don't need awards, I don't need all this other stuff, but I pray that my living offers something of a reminder to the people that are in touch, to know that we deserve ourselves in this journey. For those who want to move in service work, you are also a part of the future you are calling in. You deserve to be there just as much as the people that you say that you care about, right? We deserve a world. We deserve a country. We deserve a city. We deserve a family. We deserve a intimate relationship with ourselves that does not ask us to be anything other than our beautiful, magical selves. And I know it's possible. I'm no longer in the business of convincing or cajoling or trying to justify. I know it's possible. I've seen it move in my life. I've seen it move in the worlds that came before me. I see it moving in the worlds that come after me. And I am ready to show up and play my part and do what I have to do and have a fly ass time while doing it. Amen. I'm calling in abundance in all of the ways, the physical, tangible ways, right? But also in the emotional, like, I enjoy this life. I'm in this life. I embody myself in this lifetime. And I consent to the surrender and faith necessary for my dreams to be released, nurtured, and actualized. That's that. Have a blessed evening. It's 7:07. We're going to leave it at that. Bye-bye.